Yes, in that regard, we understand that Mr. Joseph Wirba is from the Buyi County, where you hail from. And we also understand the La Republic du Cameroon is focused on the Buyi Ngoketunja axis, which will imply more commitment from Amazonians to mount sustainable resistance. Now, how do you feel looking at elites from Buyi, like Weber, whose current behavior is forthcoming, his reaction to the revolution? How do you feel about it?
One, I want to say that uh, Honorable Weber is really like a father to me. Um, and in the early days of this revolution, we had a lot in common and we spoke a lot. He has his role, I would say this. Um, we have to acknowledge the roles that each person has played in this revolution. And I think he did a wonderful job, in standing up in the lion's den at the time that he did, to dare say the things that he said, which we use every day in this struggle, uh, um, you know, as one of our mottos. But as time went on, I think we had a divergence of how to proceed with this struggle. But just listening to him anyway, he used the word only. Only. There's one thing I know about examinations or tests. You're told, a multiple choice test, that if you ever see an answer that has only in it or always, then just know it's a wrong answer. So, Honorable Weber, I agree with a lot of things that he said, though. I'm not sure whether he actually realizes that this is exactly what the interim government is doing. Can you people hear me? I hope so. So we call him fondly Pa. So Pa mentioned that a revolution is not for the faint-hearted. It is for those who understand what long suffering is. That is true. He also mentioned that to actually get this job done, we need to organize revolutionary councils or committees, he called them, at the village level, and then at the level of the council, if I got him well, and then eventually take it at the level of the country. These I also agree. But is this not what the interim government is doing? He just calls a different name because this is the structure of the bottom up. This is the bottom up structure, which the interim government stands on. By virtue of its LGAs, you can call them villages. It's just a question of semantics, really. It's just using different words to describe the same thing. The counties, and then the federal government. This is what the interim government is made of. So I am not sure how you criticize a thing and then you describe exactly what you're criticizing, but just using different words. And then when Pa talks about only, the revolution can only be fought from the home front. That is completely elusive. If he implies that the actual fighting, which makes sense, it has to happen on the territory, and that is the home front. But then the question is, who funds the revolution? So the home front, of course, is key, but must work in symbiosis with the diaspora who does the funding. So I'm not sure how home front only can run this revolution. And Lady Onye, you actually spotted it very, it's just common sense. There is no freedom. We are living under oppression, under the most barbaric, regime you can think of. So how does Homefront freely express itself? Even those who are not in uniform are being killed. People are arrested without any cause and taken, put in prison, or completely wiped out and buried in mass graves whose names we will never know tomorrow. So how is it supposed to actually practically work on home front only? My first question is, how does Homefront alone fund this war? It is not possible without the diaspora. All other revolutions have had funding from their diaspora. So why is Ambazonia different or supposed to be different? I'm not a historian, but at least I still know that in the days of apartheid, you had people like Miriam Makeba, great woman, going about through her song and music, being a voice, uh, 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 for the active or stimulating the diaspora to respond to what was going on back home. So I'm not sure how Ambazonia is supposed to be different unless there is a source of funding to fund the ground. And where would that be coming from? Is it from La Republic? Because our people don't even have jobs. We have graduates from university, intelligent men and women who are just wasting at home because of the injustice that we have experienced all through these years. So how are they supposed to even get themselves, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's just the answers are very clear. It is, the way I see what Pi is saying, to me, even this interim government, let me say something. When people talk about it and they vilify the structure, the question is, who are they blaming? Because who created this structure? Who created the interim government? Dr. Sako did not create the interim government. So if some of us are, you just don't like the leader, and you forget even the recent history. How I wish I had the facts. I could put them chronologically. But this interim government is an evolution of this, is the result of the evolution of our struggle. In as much as we compare with other struggles, there are no two identical struggles. There are no two. When Pa says there is a structure that thinks that, and he's calling all of that, the government we had in 1954, if I can remember taking down my notes very well from all our smart barristers, we had a government before, or at least we were represented in parliament. We had prime ministers. So what does he say about that? As a matter of fact, we as seeing this interim government as a revival or a restoration of this government that was killed by La Republique. Because if the so-called fake federation was supposed to work, we were supposed to have our autonomous governments as federal states. But that was abolished because systematically the plan was to eliminate our identity and finally assimilate us, which did not work. Mr. Bia confessed himself, whether due to his dementia or not, but God used a very good way. It came out of his mouth. He said, we tried to subdue these people, to assimilate them. It didn't work. So I am just pleading to all our great leaders. Your names will be written in history for the good things you have done. But let us stay away from emotions and actually be honest. Because who can blame? Who do we criticize for the evolution into the interim government? The revolution started. None of us were prepared. Diaspora didn't start it. That is true. It started with strikes with lawyers and teachers, and then simply evolved. Nobody has control. Nobody had control. Nobody could predict what it would look like. So it has simply morphed, and it is where it is today. So you cannot come and you're trying to condemn the leader who is, a victim of circumstances, so to say. President Sako never overthrew anybody to come to sit. In fact, he's the bravest man I can say in this revolution, because when our leaders, our former president Siseko was abducted, and we were all in a state of depression and shock, everybody was scared. How many people could put out their faces at the time to say, oh, I am probably the next day going to track down? Dr. Sako never came and did a coup d'etat. No. We followed our process according to our constitutions at the time, and a leader was elected, and he was democratically elected, and he won within a landslide victory. People should remember this, because sometimes we talk as if Dr. Sako sat in his house and then decided to gather a few people and said, oh, let's form this interim government. No, the interim government existed. Siseko was the the president of the interim government. Is it hatred for an individual, or is it hatred for the institution? If you hate this interim government, are you saying that you hate the Southern Cameroon's government that existed? We had prime ministers. Do you hate that? What are we fighting then to restore? So when we move from the consortium to the SCACUF to governing council, and then eventually to interim government, who did that? Was it Dr. Sako? He wasn't even in the picture, I don't think. So please, my plea to everybody, if I were going by emotions, I would be supporting Pa Wirba, because he's truly my father. But I was brought up to stand for what is right, and I have done my best. I do my best to stick to that. I do not hate him, but I disagree with a lot of things he's doing nowadays, because we expected more from him. We expected him to even start with his county, Bowie County. It doesn't matter if you think your children didn't come to you to ask for advice. Sometimes as a parent, you can also see a child and say, hey, hold on, I think you could do things this way, if he believed that we're going the wrong path. It is easy to sit and watch and make comments, but let us get into the business itself. Even talking about Homefront alone doing this. When Paul was active when he was back home, Mancho Bibixi, of course, was one of his, should I say, activists at the time. And what happened? Soon after the Coffin Revolution, he landed in prison. So how can they then run a revolution when everybody lands in prison or is killed? Is that not a way of killing the revolution? Because everybody is going to be killed or, or imprisoned. And then we don't have the young and strong men to fight, because that's what La Republique is doing with all this arbitrary arrest, organizing whatever they call, people just being caught for no reason. So how can we possibly function in that oppressed state and run a revolution without the diaspora? That beats my imagination. So I'm just asking all Amazonians, please, let's move away from the politics and stick to your conscience, because everybody knows what is right. I believe that. If we focus on, because Paul also says what the diaspora should have done is come together. What does it mean to come together? I mean, he is also part of the diaspora. So who has he come together with? If you have, somebody going the direction left and another one going direction right, where's their midpoint? Attempts have been made by this interim government from the time of Seseko. I'm not talking about Dr. Sako. We should remember we are talking about interim government, and that interim government has a leader. So if we are pointing fingers and saying we shouldn't have created this structure, the question is who created it? Who was in Zaria? These conferences were held and the Constituent Assembly came up with that decision. Now, are you then saying that, you're against the will of the people? And part of these conferences, the consortium, which we could say was the very initial kind of an organizational body, was also part of this decision making. You cannot have a revolution without leadership. It makes no sense. So I don't understand what they're proposing, but if what they're proposing can work, why don't they do it? That's the other option. Let them do it, because we keep having all these, arrows. Oh, the interim government doesn't do this. Dr. Sako has done this and that. Okay, those who have the ideas, those who think they have alternative methods, have they taken La Republique out of our land? Because I would appreciate them, even if they are not of this interim government. It is fair to say, oh, yes, we may have different umbrellas, but I appreciate the good work you've done for Amazonia. So why don't we see this good work? Everybody claims their leaders. So please, can these leaders tell us what they have also done, following their doctrines or their, whatever they think works? So this is not a war of theories. It is really about practicalities, and we need funding to do this. And I don't know, and I don't see how home alone is going to fund this war, unless it is going to be La République du Cameroon funding home front to fight them. And of course, we know what that means. That's happening indirectly through all this kind of subtle messaging that people use wise, smart words to manipulate people. That is happening through the envelopes that are going through hands, and discouraging our fighters, telling them to give up, telling them to hand down their weapons and go to DDR. I'll be grateful if Pa can really tell us, give us a blueprint on how the home front alone can pursue this war without money and with the constant oppression. Thank you.